While the media obsesses over every tweet and the left melts down over tariffs, something revolutionary is happening. Tax cuts so massive that Democrats refuse to cast a single vote. Infrastructure actually getting fixed in months, not decades. Imported goods prices are falling while tariff revenue soars past $300 billion. Veterans finally getting respect. Kids escaping failing schools. And Netanyahu just nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. This isn't just another spending bill. It's a complete transformation of how America operates, from your paycheck to your kids' education, from the airports you fly through to prices you pay at the checkout. Everything is changing, and the establishment is terrified that you will notice. Stay tuned. Now, as Trump's big, beautiful bill transforms America with historic tax cuts and real infrastructure fixes, it's time to transform your child's education as well. Remember, freedom is never more than one generation from extinction. That is why the Tuttle twins created the most effective Liberty First content for kids. This is their monthly magazine. It teaches children about economics, liberty, and responsibility through comics, activities, and real-world lessons that counter the woke indoctrination in schools. While Trump fights for school choice, you can choose freedom education today. Right now, subscribe a loved one, a niece, a nephew, a grandchild, a son or daughter for just $56 a year. That's pennies for planting seeds of freedom. The TuttleTwins.com, TuttleTwins.com/next. It's linked below. Don't let your child be indoctrinated. Teach them to think. And we thank the Tuttle Twins for supporting this program. Okay, so we've got a lot of news to break down in this segment of the Raw Feed. We have, let's just jump right into it. There was a cabinet meeting today, a lot unfolded, and Education Secretary McMahon weighed in on the big, beautiful bill, talking about scholarships for kids.
Could I just ask Linda, she's involved in so much, she's so talented and so good, and she's working on a couple of little things like Harvard, who was given $5.5 billion over a short period of time. We caught him on that one, it's crazy, but you're working on so much, you want to bring education back to the states. How are you doing?
Well, absolutely, and thank you for the opportunity. I think on the big, beautiful bill, what we saw, with school choice, that's finally on a national basis at the state level, but there are opportunities now for scholarships, more and more of them for kids who are in failing schools. It's going to be a big turnaround. I think one of the biggest accomplishments we had over the past week was the University of Pennsylvania with the Title IX ruling that Leah Thomas was stripped of her title, Riley Gaines and Paula Scanlon and other women who have stood so strong against men and women's sports. And when you put out the the executive order, that just solidified it and gave them the opportunity. So those are a couple of really, really big wins, and thank you for that opportunity.
And how are you doing with Columbia and Harvard?
We're negotiating hard. I think we're getting close to having that happen. It's not wrapped up as fast as I wanted to, but we're getting there.
Okay, good. And you've done a fantastic job. Thank you very much.
It's been a good team.
Yep, you have a great team.
Around this table, a lot of people help.
Let's keep going here. Here is President Trump on Jerome Powell, of course, the Fed chair.
Too tall, John. I think he's terrible. I think, look, we're paying, I call him Too Late. T-O-O, Too Late. Like Too Tall Jones for the Dallas Cowboys, right? Too late. He's always late. But he wasn't late with Biden before the election. He was cutting him like crazy. It didn't help too much, did it? But he was cutting him like crazy before the election with Kamala and Biden. He was trying to get them in, I guess. I don't know. He was recommended by somebody that worked for me. I like you better. I think he's terrible.
I like you better. Who was he looking at? Yeah, here's more President Trump talking about the big, beautiful bill.
The great, big, beautiful bill. I always use the word great. I add that to it because it really is what it is. There's never been anything like it, actually. And I want to thank all the Republicans.
Okay, so I just asked you, who was he looking at when he said, I think you're great? And he looked right across the table at the Treasury Secretary Bessent. So is the Treasury Secretary in the running for the Fed chair if Jerome Powell is out? Looks like he is a strong contender. I mean, right there, you can see the eye line. Boom. Okay, sorry, I digress. I just noticed that because of what he said in the last clip. Let's continue.
That voted for it. And I want to, scold the Democrats because they're voting for tax cuts. They're voting for no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, and many, many other things far more important than that. Great health care. And frankly, every Democrat should lose their election because it was purely political vote. They were told not to vote for it. So think of it. We got 218 to 2. And then with the Senate, we had 50 to 3. Democrats didn't vote at all, not one positive vote, with all of the good things in there. Economic development money, tremendous border money. Now you're loaded up on the border. And I don't think we're going to need so much of it because we had zero come in last month, so I'm not sure how much of it we want to spend. You may think about that. You may actually think about saving a lot of money because the wall's been largely built. And it obviously worked, but you may want to think about that. But so I think it's incredible when I watch the Democrats, and they have standard lines like they had Russia, Russia, Russia. They had the laptop from hell. It all came from Russia. They make things up and they go with it, and they feed it to you people in many cases. And they said, "Here's a line," and I hear the new line is death. Oh, it's death. Everyone's going to die. There's nothing to do
What?
You said people gonna die?
with that. In fact, we're saving our country. Death is from allowing 25 million people into our country, of which 3 or 4 are stone cold, hard criminals. 11,888 are murderers, many of them committing more than one murder. That's death, and the Democrats did that. Joe Biden did that by allowing people to come in here, just totally unchecked, unvetted, open borders. The whole world was dumped into our country from prisons, from gangs, from mental institutions. We have many people walking the streets, walking in areas that we don't know anything about, that came out of insane asylums. They released the insane asylum population into our country, and it's amazing the job that you and Tom Homan are doing, by the way, on that.
Moving right along, here is the Treasury Secretary talking about $100 billion in tariff income.
And that's, yes, sir, we will have taken in about $100 billion in tariff income thus far this year, and that's with the tariff, the major tariff not having started till the second quarter. So we could expect that could be well over $300 billion by the end of the year. We don't agree with CBO scoring, but for those who do, the CBO scored tariff income over the next 10 years at $2.8 trillion, which we think is probably low. Yes, sir, we will have taken in about...
The Council of Economic Advisors, the official account, they say research finds that the price of imported have fallen and declined faster than overall goods since February. Here is the chairman, Steve Moran.
Advisors website. So a new work that our team has done, that'll be on the Council of Economic Advisors website today, what we did was we looked at, in every category in the inflation index, we looked at how much of it is coming from imports, both whether the good itself is an import, but also whether it, uses intermediate goods, that is parts in between the raw product and the finished product that come from abroad. And so we have a measure for each product in the index about how much of an import it is. And what we find is exactly what you said before, that imported goods are actually getting cheaper. So
Yeah, that's exactly the opposite of what the mainstream press had to say. All the fear tactics. Here's Secretary Duffy talking about the delays at Newark Airport.
We saw the slowdowns and delays at Newark. It was because we had an old line, a copper wire line that kept going down. In 2 months, Griff, we laid, with the help of Verizon and L3 Harris, brand new fiber lines. So we have all the appropriate lines to keep communication alive and well. We had a couple moments where we lost communication out of the TRACON that controls Newark for 30 seconds. That's frightening. We have a whole bunch of redundancies in place to make sure our passengers and our aircraft are safe. But it's a big deal. And it just shows how fast companies in America are working with the FAA to make sure we do this build. And by the way, in the big, beautiful bill, we're going to do this all over the country. The Congress gave us the money to lay fiber and replace all of the copper, which is incredibly important. And by the way, this would have never happened but for the leadership of President Trump. We saw the division. I spent 10 years in Congress. There was not a lot of agreement on a lot of the issues. Right. And it was the force of nature of Donald Trump who drove this across the finish line. And this is one small part that's incredibly important to make sure we can start to rebuild our air traffic control system. So,
thankfully, we have some competent people working now. Here's Secretary of Veteran Affairs cutting through the fake news theatrics on the reforms at the VA.
Also media. Well, I'm happy to talk about this because, in contrast to the theatrics that many of the Democratic members of Congress and also media, unfortunately, and others in the unions talked about when we first started out on what we'll be looking at our overall force structure, we did a very thoughtful, very careful study of looking at our force structure and how we were structured and how we were aligned to take care of veterans. And the great thing I can report to you now is a promise that I made back then and a promise I kept, that the original 15% was a goal. We were going to make sure that we took care of veterans, we took care of disability claims, and we made sure that there was a seamless process. And in the process, we also protected 350,000 positions to make sure that none of those services were cut. And in the end, what we have done is we've been able to use the attrition, use the deferred retirement plan to actually get us to our goal of making sure that we're more aligned with what we need to be doing, and that is taking care of veterans from day one. I'm very proud of the work that we've done, the very careful work that was done by the staff and the career employees at the VA to continue to look at how we are structuring our force. Now, we still got a little bit to go. We've got some other things that we want to do in the future, but this is a great start, and it's making sure our veterans are taken care of.
It's good news all around, and I love it. Finally, some good news to report for a change. Here we have Representative Greg Steube talking about what we can expect by January of next year.
But what's going to be interesting is by January of next year, the impacts of this bill, no tax on tips, no tax on manufacturing, all the different permanency of the tax rates that we did in this bill. The American people are going to be seeing that early next year, especially the tax credit we gave for those on Social Security. And it's going to have a huge economic impact to the electorate. And the Democrats keep wanting to say this is a tax cut for billionaires. Billionaires aren't making tips as they're waiting on tables at restaurants. Billionaires aren't on Social Security. And so these impacts to the American people, the working class of the American people, they're going to see this, and it's going to be a huge economic impact to not just the country, but to the Republican base because of the policies that the president passed. But what's going to...
But how can you...
And let's see, we got here. Well, the Biden administration practiced strangulation by regulation. President Trump is slashing the red tape to bring in more capital and lower prices for America. Secretary Doug Burgum.
Regulation, Biden administration's strangulation by regulation was very effective at one thing, driving capital away from developing on federal resources. And this, by us cutting this regulation, we can actually lower the break-even point for people in the oil and gas industry developing, because at a lower price per barrel, they can still make money, because I think we can cut at least 10% of the price of a barrel right now on federal land is regulatory overhead cost.
If you have value from this report, tap subscribe. My final thought is next. So why does this matter? Because results beat rhetoric every single time. Democrats screamed that tariffs would destroy the economy. Okay? Instead, we're collecting $300 billion while import prices drop. They said the tax cuts would bankrupt America. Instead, business is flooding back and paychecks are growing. They claim infrastructure was impossible. Yet Newark Airport went from ancient copper to cutting-edge fiber in 2 months flat. No tax on tips, Social Security, where overtime means real money in real pockets for real Americans. School choice means parents, not bureaucrats, control education. Well, Biden spent $7.5 billion on EV chargers to deliver exactly 7 stations. Trump's delivering actual infrastructure that works. Even Netanyahu sees it, nominating Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize after witnessing real leadership. So here is the question. Should Democrats who voted against every tax cut, should they be voted out in the midterms? Drop your yes or no down below. And grab your next news gear from our shop. We've got Alligator Alcatraz, brand new merch. We got President Otto Penn and our American Badass series. You need to check it out. I think you'll like it. Trigger a liberal today. Linked below at shop.nextnewsnetwork.com.